Tony Hawk's Pro Skater had 3 major versions, and they weren't all created equal. Today, we're breaking down the PlayStation, Nintendo 64, and Dreamcast versions to see what makes each one different.
This game hit at the perfect time. Skateboarding was everywhere, Tony Hawk was blowing up, and this thing felt cool the second you turned it on. Even if you never stepped on a skateboard in your life, it still pulled you in. The music, the levels, the tricks, it all just clicked. And depending on what system you had, you were actually playing a pretty different version of the game.
First up is the PlayStation version, the one that started it all. This is the version that most people probably think of first. By today's standards, yeah, it looks rough. Lower resolution, more fog, more texture warping, and the frame rate can get a little shaky. But back then, none of that mattered. This was the version that made the first impression. This is where people first heard the soundtrack, first saw the levels, and first got hooked. The PlayStation version's biggest advantage is simple. This is the one people fell in love with. It has the full soundtrack, the original feel, and the raw late 90s presentation. But once you line it up next to the others, it's also the version that shows its age the most.
Then you get to the Nintendo 64 version. And this is, but isn't the same game. Right away it looks a little different. In some spots, it feels smoother. And if this was the version you had growing up, you probably remember thinking it looked pretty good. But the more time you spent with it, the more the trade-offs started showing up. It's still Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, obviously, but it's not just the PlayStation version copied over. The visuals are a little different, the sound is definitely different, and the cartridge limitations show up pretty fast.
Now put the PlayStation and Nintendo 64 versions side by side, and this is where it becomes clear. Watch the movement first. The Nintendo 64 version can feel a little smoother, and that's probably one of the first things people noticed back then. But then the music kicks in, and that's where the Nintendo 64 version takes a hit. Songs are shortened, vocals are missing, and some of the soundtrack just doesn't hit the same way it does on PlayStation. Then look at the levels. Some textures are flatter on Nintendo 64, some details are missing, and some effects are toned down. The PlayStation version keeps more of that full original presentation, but it also has more of that rough, early 3D look. So this is where it starts becoming a real trade-off. Nintendo 64 does some things better, but it also gives some things up. If you really watch them side by side, especially on a level like warehouse or school, the differences jump out way faster than you probably remember.
And now, we get to the good stuff, the Game Boy Color version. Look at this thing. Absolute perfection. Portable skating perfection. Alright, obviously not. This thing's more of a weird little side note than something you'd seriously compare with the home versions. It's neat that it exists, but we're not going to sit here and pretend this thing belongs in the same conversation.
Now let's move on to the Dreamcast version. This is the version that ties it all together. Right away, it looks cleaner, sharper, and a lot more polished than the PlayStation and Nintendo 64 versions. The higher resolution helps. The skaters have more detail. There's less fog. And the levels open up a lot more. You can see farther, and everything looks cleaner in motion. And it feels like the version that actually got a step up. That's what really sells the Dreamcast version. It still feels like the original game, but it looks like the version that finally got the hardware to show it off a little better.
Now put the Dreamcast version next to the PlayStation and Nintendo 64 versions and the gap gets pretty obvious. The image is cleaner, the presentation is stronger, the soundtrack keeps more of what made the original so good, and overall, it just feels like the most complete version of the three. The PlayStation version still has that original identity, and the Nintendo 64 version still has its own look, but the Dreamcast version feels like the one where everything comes together best. If you watch all three back to back, especially on some of the bigger levels, Dreamcast is the one that stands out the most.
That's what makes this comparison fun. All three of these are still Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, but they're not exactly the same. And once you line them up side by side, you notice way more than you ever did back then. The PlayStation version is the classic. The Nintendo 64 version is the interesting alternate version. And the Dreamcast version is the one that feels like a real upgrade. No matter which one you had, this game was a big deal. And that's probably the biggest thing this comparison reminds you of, going over to your buddy's house and playing their versions and vice versa. This was the beginning of an era of gaming.
That does it for this one. We wanted to thank you for watching, and remember, please like and subscribe, and make sure to let us know which version you had and which one you thought was the best.